Base Gimel. It permitted to place the slats close to the wall, close to the well, provided that a cow has its head and most of its body within while drinking. It's permitted to place the slats at any distance, provided one increases the slats. Yehuda says until two betzah. They said to him, they did not say two betzah, but they said in regard to a garden or a carpet. When it was a fold, a corral, a backyard, or a courtyard, even 5 korim, even 10 korim is permissible. And it is permitted to place the slats at any distance, provided one adds slats. Rabbi Yehuda says if the general traffic passes between them, it must be diverted to the side, but the comments say it is unnecessary. Whether a public cistern, a public well, or a private well, may they erect slats. For a private cistern, they must erect a portion 10 tefachim high. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, they may not erect slats except for a public well, but for the others, they must erect an enclosure 10 tefachim high. Okay.
Okay. ועוד אמר Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. So, what else did Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba say? He said, Hagina v'karpef shehen shivim ama v'shirayim al shivim ama v'shirayim mukefes gader gavor asatrachim metaltin v'socha. I said, okay, so this is, he says, when you're talking about um, a garden or a wood pile, which has basically there's no human dwelling inside it. So it's but if it's surrounded by a mechitza properly, then you're allowed to carry within it, as long as it does not exceed the size of a base satayim, right? Which is which works out geometrically to 70 point something amas. Okay,
Right.
Right, that comes to, so it's like basically 5,000 amas squared. Okay. Um 5,000 square amas, not 5,000 amas squared. If I- so basically saying that it's got to be in a square shape though. Why? We'll see it. Mukefes gadeg starts from taltin v'socha u'bivachi heba shomira or base dira. So he says, but it does need to have a guard hut or some little human dwelling inside it, or or it needs to be close to the city. So yeah, it's good it's good to carry inside it, but it's got to have a human some sort of human dwelling in it to make it to make it carryable. Rabbi
It's
Yehuda,
interesting that
hmm?
it's interesting that they don't say how close to the city it must be, just as near a city.
Smucha, meaning probably within the
Uh-huh.
not just within the tchum, but probably within the amount of space that it's considered that it adds to the tchum. So basically, it's got to be 70 amas within 70 amas of the last house.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. So it's either one is fine. If it's close to the city, then that's good enough. But if it's more than 70 amas from the last house, then it's got to have some sort of dwelling inside it.
It does say here near a city is defined as within the 2,000 cubit radius,
Within the 2,000 cubit radius.
which is the Sabbath Techum. It's a
Ah,
note.
okay, I see. Okay, fine. Right. I was just wondering like how he was going to get to it if it's not within the tchum. But maybe he could make an Erev. What he could do is make an Erev Techumin, or he could have started Shabbos out in that place.
This is from Rabbi Yehosan, Yosef Yehosan.
Okay. Anyway,
All right.
it carries on with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda on there. Afilu ein ba ela bor v'shiach umara metalteli b'socha. Nah, even a god. It doesn't need a god hut or a house or anything like that. It just needs a cistern or a little cave or something that people find useful. What's the translation of shiach?
Ditch. A ditch.
Thank you, a ditch, bor shiach. Metaltin v'socha. Rabbi Akiva omer afilu ein ba el achas mikol elu metaltin v'socha. Rabbi Akiva comes and says, you don't need anything. No features required at all. It can just be a plain old wood pile. you're allowed to carry inside it Bilvachie ba shivim ama v'shiraim al shivim ama v'shiraim. But it should not be bigger than 70 by 70, 70 and a bit by 70 and a bit to make the 5,000 square amas. Okay, now v'shiraim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im haya orka yaser al rochba afilu ama achas. If you have such a situation where the length exceeds the width, in other words, it's no longer square, but even one amma, and even if it's if the area is still within the 5,000, so let's say you added an amma on this side and took away an amma on the other side, so that it's the area is less, but it's in that range. And metalton besocha. He says that makes it no longer carryable. I'm not sure why he has this requirement that it needs to be square, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Chachamim only permitted carrying inside inside such a large karpef or beit or gina, if it was if it's square, if its area is square, and I don't understand. I have no idea what the logic is behind saying that it has to be perfectly square. But at any rate, that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Yossi Omer afilu orka pi shnayim berochba metaltin v'socha. Rabbi Yossi says that's not a thing. Even if the area is even if the width is twice the length, or length is twice the width, it's still perfectly fine to carry in it as long as the area is no more than base sasayim. Okay. Amar Rabbi Eli, Shamati me Rabbi Eliezer. So he says, I have a Masorah that from Rabbi Eliezer that vafilu hika base core, that it could even be an area of a base core. V'chein Shamati, and he's gonna come in with three things that he heard from Rabbi Eliezer. And v'chein Shamati mimenu anshe chatze sheshachach echad mehem v'lo erev. I heard that if you have a whole bunch of houses around a shared chatzer, and one of them forgot to join in the Erev Chatzeros, so now that would break the Erev Chatzeros, and it's already Shabbos now, and everyone's busy giving him the stink eye because he's messed up their Erev. So what does he do? Beiso asur milahachnis umilahatzilo. Okay, but so beg your pardon. So what's not said over here is that he waives his rights to the chatzer. He waives his rights in the property, so that everyone else is allowed to carry between their houses and the chatzer, and the neighbors are now pleased with him. But for himself, his own house is asur milahachnis u'milahotzi lo, aval lehem mutar. He's not allowed to carry from his house into the chatzer, but his neighbors are allowed to. Because not only this is an interesting little touch over here that he heard from Rabbi Eliezer, and the third thing that he heard, Ken Shamati Mimenu, sheyotzin ba'akrabanim b'Pesach, that akrabanim is a kind of a herb, and he says that you can use that herb for maror. The Chizarti al kol talmidav. I went through all the people who learned with Rabbi Eliezer. And I said, does anyone else remember Rabbi Eliezer saying these things? And I couldn't find anyone else who remembered this. And everyone else looks at Rabbi Eli and says, well, that's mate, because you remembered it wrong. All these, and that in fact is the case that all these three things that he claims to have remembered from Rabbi Eliezer, none of them is la halacha, so. But we nonetheless we trust him. We trust that Rabbi Eli wasn't just making things up, but nonetheless, since he couldn't find any substantiation, we don't treat it as a serious halachic opinion. Nonetheless, noted for posterity. Okay, Perek Gimel. B'chol ma'arvin u'mishtatfin chutz min hamayim u'min hamelech. You can make an eruv, and you can make a shituf mavos with any kind of food except for salt and water. Okay, and while we're talking about salt and water, here are some other things that are unique to salt and water. Hakol nikach bekesef maser. Everything can be purchased with Masasheni money. You go to Yerushalayim, you buy food and drink, but you cannot buy chutz min mayim min hamelach. You cannot buy water and salt with Masasheni money. Hanodeh min hamazon. If somebody takes a neder that they're not allowed, that they're not going to eat any food, um, presumably this would be a time-bound neder because otherwise that's like taking a neder to die. But like let's say he took a neder that for the whole of today, food is a korban to me. So mutar b'mayim u'b'melach. He is permitted to drink water and to eat salt. Okay, ma'arvin lenazir, and you I think that's all about the water and salt. Incidentally, this is one of the things I noticed when I was in school and doing chemistry, that the only two foods things that we ingest that are not organic are water and salt, because we were doing like organic versus inorganic chemistry. And so water and salt are inorganic, and everything else is organic. Anyway, that's just a little fun aside. Ma'arvin lenazir. You can make an eruv for a nazir. B'yayin that includes wine. Okay, even though he is asked to have wine. Okay, or Yisrael b'truma, and also for a Jew, for a regular Israel, with truma food. Okay, this is just because it is food and it's edible to somebody. Okay, since
Right.
it's edible to somebody, it's a valid Erev, and you can include the Israel or the Nazir inside that Erev. Sumchus disagrees. Uh, Sumchus says b'chulin. It has to be chulin for a Yisrael.
Right.
Although he does not disagree, by the way, about the Nazir. Why? Because the Nazir has the potential to go and ask a shaylas chacham, and he can have his Naziris permitted. But a Yisrael cannot have his Yisraelis permitted. Now you could try and do a shtick with the truma and say, oh, well, actually I declared this truma by mistake, but then you've got to find another truma to replace it with, and you can't do that on Shabbos. So
Right. So
uh,
okay.
that's why Somchus only disagrees about the truma, not about the wine. But a coin beves a pras, and you can also put the eruv food of a truma of a coin inside a base of pras, which is where the grave was plowed over, and it would be a valid eruv. Rabbi Yehuda Omer afilu bebeis hakvaros. He says, never mind the beis pras. You could make it in a proper cemetery. You could put the food in the proper cemetery. Why? Because there are ways that a kohen could actually enter a cemetery. Mipnei sheyachol lelech lachotz v'le'echol. Because he can go and take a bunch of boards and in ways that prevent him from becoming tamei, and he can walk between the boards and get to the point where the food isn't eat it. So it's still a valid area for him. Okay.
Okay. Good. Good.
Okay, back to Shabbos.
So that was Ed Gimel Aleph. A person may borrow pitchers of wine or pitchers of oil from his friend, provided he does not say to him, "Lend me." In the same manner, a woman may borrow loaves of bread from a friend. If from her friend, if he does not trust him, he may leave his cloak with him and make a reckoning with him after Shabbos. So too in Yerushalayim, when the day before Pesach falls on Shabbos, he may leave his cloak with him, take his Pesach offering, and make a reckoning with him after Yom Tov. A person may count his guests and desserts early, but not from a written note. And he may cast lots with his children and members of his household for portions at the table, provided he does not intend to wager a larger portion against a smaller. Because of the prohibition of gambling, And Kohanim may cast lots for sacrifice on Yom Tov, but not for portions. Okay. A person may not hire workers on Shabbos, nor may a person tell his friend to hire workers for him. We may not go out to await nightfall at the Shabbos boundary for the purpose of hiring workers for bringing produce, but one may await nightfall to enable him to watch and bring produce in his hand. Abishol say the general rule: whatever is I am permitted to instruct for the Shabbos, I am permitted to await nightfall for it. Okay.
Vav Yud.
Good. We may go out with a locust egg or with a tooth. Oh, we may go out with a locust leg or with a fox tooth or with a nail from gallows for the gallows for the purpose of healing. These are the words of Ramea. The comments say even on weekdays these are forbidden because of the prohibition against following in the ways of the Amorites. A major rule was stated by the sages concerning the Shabbos. Anyone who forgot this essence of Shabbos and performed many labors on Shabbos is liable for but one sin offering. One who knew the essence of Shabbos and performed many labors on Shabbos is liable for every Shabbos. One who knew that it is Shabbos and performed many labors on many Shabbos is liable for every primary category of labor. And one who knew that it is Shabbos and performed many labors in one category of labor is liable for but one sin offering. The primary labors are 40 minus 1, sowing, plowing, reaping, gathering together, threshing, winnowing, sorting, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, shearing wool, whiting it, combing it, dyeing it, spinning, mounting the warp, setting two heddles, weaving two threads, removing two threads, tying a knot, untying a knot, sewing two stitches and tearing in order to sew two stitches, chopping a deer and slaughtering it, skinning it, salting it, tanning its hide, smoothing and cutting it, writing two letters and erasing in order to write two letters, building and demolishing, extinguishing and kindling and striking the final blow, and transferring objects from one domain to another. These are the primary labors, 40 minus 1. Okay. Okay. Too much. Okay. Here we go. Olive. We put one onion into lentils if it was whole. It was permitted, but if it's be cut up, it imparts a flavor. In the case of all of the dishes where the whole are cut up, it imparts a flavor. The Yehuda permits in the case of a pickled fish, since it is used only to remove the bad smell. If one grated an apple and put it into dough and leavened it, it is forbidden. If barley fell into a cistern of water, even though it is tainted the water, it is permitted. And if one takes out of the oven warm bread and puts it over the mouth of a jar of truma wine, Reb Meir forbids it, but Reb Yehuda permits it. Reb Yossi permits of wheat, but forbids of barley because the barley absorbs.
Okay.
Mikvos. Okay, dollar. If drawn water and rainwater became mixed in a courtyard or in a ditch or in the steps of a cave when the majority is valid water, the mikveh is valid. But when the majority is invalid water, the mikveh is invalid. Half and half it is invalid. When they became mixed before they reached the mikveh. When, however, they flowed directly into the water. It is known that 40 sa'ar of valid water fell in before 3 lugam of drawn water came down, and the mikveh is valid. Otherwise, it's invalid. Regarding a trough in a rock, one may not fill into it, nor may one consecrate in it, nor may one sprinkle out of it, nor does it require a sealed cover, nor does it qualify a mikveh. But if it was a vessel and one attached it to the ground with mortar, then one may fill into it, and one may consecrate in it, and one may sprinkle out of it, and it requires a sealed cover, and it disqualifies a mikveh. If it has a hole on the bottom or the side so that you cannot hold any water at all, it is valid. How large must the hole be? The size of the tube of a water skin. Rabbi Yehuda ben Becerra says there was a case of Yahweh's trough in Jerusalem that had a hole the size of a tube of a water skin, and all the ritually pure foods in Jerusalem were prepared on its basis. And Beit Shammai said and broke it. Beit Shammai said it is not valid until the greater part thereof is broken. And if water of a spring was directed over a trough, it is valid. But if it was directed over the edge even a little, then that which is outside the trough is valid because the spring purifies whatever its amount. If it was directed over a pool and it was then interrupted, it is like a mikvah. If it was made to flow again, it remains unfit for tzavim and for mitzarim and for consecrating, therefore, purification water until one knows that the form of water has flowed out. Okay. And boom. Gimel Aleph. These are accounted treifa in animals. An animal whose esophagus is punctured and whose trachea is severed. If the membrane of the brain was punctured, if the heart was punctured into its cavity, if the spine was broken and its cord severed, if the liver was removed and nothing remains of it, if the lung was punctured or if it was deficient, Reb Shimon said not unless it penetrates to the bronchi. The abbasim was punctured, or the gallbladder was punctured, the intestines were punctured, or if the inner paunch was punctured, or the greater part of the outer one was torn. The Yehuda says in a large animal, a handbreadth, and a small animal, the greater part. If the amosim is or the reticulum was punctured to its outside, if it fell from a roof, if most of its ribs are broken, or one that was clawed by a wolf, one unit says one that was clawed by a wolf, treifa. In the case of small animals, but only if clawed by a lion. In the case of large animals, one that was clawed by a net. In the case of a small fowl, or one that was clawed by a goss. In the case of a large fowl, this is the general rule. If an animal with a similar defect cannot live, it is treifa. And the following are kosher animals. If the trachea was punctured or slit, how much must be missing? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says up to the size of an Italian issa. If the skull was cracked, but the membrane of the brain was not punctured, if the heart was punctured but not into its cavity, if the spinal column was broken but the cord was not severed, if the liver was removed but an olive-sized piece remains, the omasum and the reticulum were punctured into one another, and the spleen was removed. The kidneys were removed, the lower jaw was removed, the uterus was removed, and the lung is shriveled through non-human agency. One whose skin is flayed, the Rebbe declares it fit, and the Chachamim declare it unfit. These are accounted treifa in fowl. A fowl whose esophagus is punctured or whose trachea is severed, a weasel struck on the head in a place where it renders a treifa. The gizzard was punctured, the intestines were punctured. If it fell into a fire and its internal organs were scorched, if they turned green, they are unfit, and if they are red, they are fit. If one trod on it or knocked against the wall, or an animal crushed it and it flutters and remained alive for 24 hours and he slaughtered it, it is fit. Okay.
Hey,
Nazim.
Naz.
Okay. Zion base. For contamination from the following sources of tuba, the Nazim must shave for a corpse, for an olive-sized bulk of a corpse, or an olive-sized bulk of a netzel, or a ladle full of decayed corpse, or the spinal column of the skull, or a limb severed from a corpse, or a limb severed from a living body that has insufficient flesh, or half a cob of bones, or half a log of blood, whether the contamination is transmitted by contact, carrying, or on a roof, or for tumor from a bone the size of barley grain. Whether fit for contamination, it's transmitted by contact or by carrying. For these and others, shave, sprinkles on the third and seventh day, forfeits the previous days, and does not resume counting until it becomes tumor and brings the sacrifices. But for tumor permitted by bronchocavities or protrusions, or a field to which a grave has been plowed over, or the land of the nations, or the coffin covering, or the coffin, or a quarter log of blood, or a tent, or a quarter log of bones, or utensils that touch a corpse on the days, or the days of its already counting, or the days of its confirmed saras, for these the nazir does not shave. But if sprinkled on the third and seventh days, and he does not forfeit the preceding days, and it begins to count right away, and he has no sacrifice. In truth, they said the days of Azava or Azava are the days of confinement for the Mitzvah. These are counted for him. Rabbi Elliot says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Yeshua, any tumor from a corpse which a nazir shaves, one is liable because of it entering the temple. And for any tumor which a corpse from which a nazir does not shave, one is not liable for it for entering the temple. Reb Meir said this should not be more lenient than tumor contracted from a creeping thing. And Reb Kiva said, I reasoned before Reb Eliezer, if for a bone the size of a barley grain, which does not contaminate a person by way of a roof, the nazir shaves for touching it or carrying it, for a quarter log of blood which contaminates a person even by the way of a roof, it is not clear that a nazir should shave for touching it or carrying it. He said to me, What is this? What is this, Akiva? He said, We cannot reason here by Kachal Mahoma. When I came and relayed these things to you, Rabbi Shua, he said to me, You have spoken well, but so have they said as an oral law. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Shabbos.
Have a great Shabbos. Enjoy. I'll see you Sunday. Thank you.